The art of listening. I do practice it. We had, when the songbooks first came out, and it was done in music, but there was a list of things: listen, follow, obey, deepen, and then it went on from there. Of course, the first one was listen. And, of course, the first place we have to listen is inside. And we got to be open for that. And recognizing that the Father is always available to talk to us. Always. To lead us and to consult with. Always. And sometimes you may not get an answer right away. But if you keep the door open and you say, okay, Father, this is an important thing that I'm looking at. I'll wait until you give me a reproof of one way or another. Other times, you got to make a move, and so you go in. If you don't get a clear answer, you just go in faith, no problemos. Listening. Most of the difficulty we have, once we're already listening inside, as best as we know, is listening with each other. And the Father does come through our brothers and sisters and everybody we meet, everything that we experience. He's coming through. And so the ability to drop ourselves and clear our minds and actually hear what a person is saying. And, what I notice a lot of times is the mind will be going while somebody else is speaking. There's no way you can, because I see it all the time. Even people, well, let's say that, I'm relating something and they already know. No, even if it's an increment different, they don't know what I'm feeling, and that's what I'm expressing. They don't know exactly how I feel it. So even if it's just an increment, to be able to receive it and to not have that mind going for an answer already before the fullness has been given. Now, I do know sometimes it takes a lot of patience because people can be long-winded, and I don't really have a lot of patience myself when it's not going anywhere. No, I don't. And there's certain things I don't really feel like listening to anymore. I listen to them to the point I go, okay, this is not serving. So we have all of those. But there is the listening and the openness and, watching Amen. Oh, what an amazement of the patience and the ability and stillness to allow people to fully express themselves. Even when it was counter the truth, it wasn't of. His ability of stillness and not reaction. There would be times people would come in denying him heavily. And, the brothers and sisters would be, and he'd just be in total calm peace and a stillness. And then when they unloaded all their stuff, I don't know how many times I've watched that because, and partly because he gave in that fullness, that now they had to open up to some degree for a response. And the responses that Amen had would alter people. I don't know how many times I watched people come in with all this angst and leave in love. They didn't know who they talked to. No, they didn't have that part down, but they got moved and altered. And, just purely by feeling the love that Amen gave them. They couldn't deny it. And, a lot of that expression come through the ability to receive, to listen, to take it all on. And like I say, once you get to know somebody and they keep going back to the same place, of course, then I shut it down. That's enough of that, okay? It's not feeding anything. But the openness and really listening and with people we're familiar with, and how a lot of times conversations get speeded up, that you're responding before the person finished, especially when there's a different point of view occurring, the need to slow it down, get it more centered in the heart, not a competition, not a right and wrong. See, the thing about it is that when we start getting in that speed up, we're already in defense mechanisms. And, whoever caused it first, it doesn't really matter. The ability to slow it back down, get it back centered in the heart. And then you're listening to two things, especially open to hear the other person. and let them finish what they're saying, and then listening to your own responses and really listening to your space. When I have it happen to me, that things get speeded up, I'm rarely totally on point in those situations. No, I'd have to be really solid on my knees and very much at peace. And I know myself, it's a rare situation when it's speeding up like that, because there's usually, one of us, but let's say I pronounced something or related something and the other person reacted in a defensive manner and came back with what you could say kind of an attack on it. That's when you got to, okay, calmate. And the thing about it is those principalities are so good at getting you caught up. It's not easy to get past all that. And the only way, of course, you're going to do it totally is if you are really landed in the place where it's not about you at all. Because it always ends up, because we all have little egos still, that little ego gets offended, and now you're in it with the other person. And I listen to myself. I really do. And I offer up situations like that. I always offer them up to the Father afterwards, and I really examine them. I examine the back and forth and what I said and where I went, and I'm really listening. That's the key. I watch. A lot of people don't do that. They don't listen to themselves. And of course, they weren't listening to the other person totally, because when it starts getting into that mode, no, you're already off on one. And the ability to really track your own space is huge. And then, the beauty of listening, you're not going to be able to repeat things usually exactly the way they were given to you, especially stories and things like that. But they become part of my jewel box. All the things that people share with me when I really listen. Oh, yeah, man. It's part of me. Now it's part of me. Now I've added that unto myself. And then there's all the listening that goes on from different points of view. And, I've been learning little by little, that someone has a point of view that is, little different. Not, it doesn't have to be hugely. It's a little different. And by receiving that, even if it is large difference, but especially, in most conversations, especially with brothers and sisters, there's a different balance that's being experienced in the person, in their perceptions, than maybe mine. And learning to just receive that without a counter to it, even if I see it differently, absorb it totally inside my being first. And then what happens, a lot of times, you get an understanding that you didn't foresee, but you wouldn't have gotten it if you had an immediate response. Because that immediate response would have just pushed my own way of looking at it. And I'm still a little slow on that one. But I'm recognizing it. Because this interplay that we have with one another, it's huge. If you looked at it like all the little altercations that take place as wars in the world, and people getting all riled up and all angst and hurting one another. It goes all the way to the extreme that it goes to. But you could see it like in politics, religion, anything that people have put a lot of themselves into, and then they find something counter to it that will bring up that angst. We all have that. People express it differently. I've been really seeing that the need to overcome that, even in its smallest forms, really getting down with the fact that adding something unto, unless it's necessary, that somebody else said, is a way of defending your own point of view. And it slows down your ability to really hear what another person's saying. Whereas if you can subdue that part, totally still, totally open. I mean, there is no threat. See, that's the real bottom line. See, all the little, and I'm going to call them little defense mechanisms, which actually, they become big when the energy builds up. It does become big because it becomes a wedge in between you and another person. And the ability, to watch Amen and his ability to shut that down. Of course, he demanded and received a high level of recognition to be with him for any length of time. So we would be pretty off base to not give that to him. But this was an ability he had no matter who came up in front of him. It didn't matter. I mean, I can't remember how many times even people who had known him for years and came in and they were running off with some space that just went on and on and on. And how he could listen. And brothers and sisters be sitting around cringing already. And you wouldn't feel that in Amen. Nope. No, you wouldn't. It was easy for him. Because he already knew. He knew the end result of everything, and he absolutely knows who he is. So nothing's going to shake that space of who he is and where he's coming from. And see, we all have, because we're not complete in that place. So the art of listening, oh yeah, it's huge. And then all the jewels that come from it. It's pretty rare that I watch people listening without thinking. Without actually thinking while you're speaking to them. I mean, even giving instructions on mundane things. They're already off somewhere else. You come back and you see they didn't hear you. And it doesn't matter how clear you made it, how slow you talked. Doesn't matter. Because if they're thinking somewhere else, they cannot hear clearly. And so you could run it down. Oh, I already told you all this. Come on. No, it ain't going to work. You just got to accept the fact that that's common. It's uncommon. And for people to really listen. I don't know how true it is because, of course, I wasn't there. But the Native Americans, from what I understand, and it makes sense to me, that they recognize the power of the spoken word. And when they would sit in communion in the tribal setting and men would speak, they would know that what they were putting forth had a sacred power to it. And so they would, of course, be expedient in what they had to say. They wouldn't get too flowery and too crazy on a bunch of words. Get to the point, make it clear, and everybody would be really listening. See, that was the point. One person speaking at a time, and people really listening, taking it in, before there was a response. Sacredness of communication. It's huge. And I'm sure what I'm relating here, everybody's experienced to some degree or another. The biggest thing we can do, of course, you start seeing the outward reflections. I mean, that's the first thing everybody always sees is how things will, come back at them. And it's always good to remember that if we see it out there, it's happening over here. And work on that part. And even if you've become, let's say you had the blessing where it's pretty easy for you to listen to another person and really hear. And there's still deeper places. So yeah, listening. Amen.